Welcome back to the Crypto Clown World podcast. I'm your host with the honks, Jason Bruce. We are honking back in. It is the 6th of October, and I do, as always, have my co-host with me here, Mr. Christopher Lundy. How you doing this weekend?
I'm doing as best good as can be expected. My heart is heavy. Jason, my family, my extended family is stuck in this mess in Asheville. I'm going to cover some aspects, but not all aspects of that because there are confirmed and unconfirmed reports coming from that area. But I can tell you that, and I'll cover it more during the show, that people are having to go all the way down to Atlanta and then back north to get into the area. It is that bad in terms of the road damage. But other than that, my spirits are high, and I have been working hard on everything that I need to be doing, so I don't feel ashamed at all.
Gotcha. Good to have you here as always, man.
Thank you.
Prayers to you and your family, and we hope that everybody, aside from your family, everybody else that is affected there is okay and is recovering, and that things can start to get back to normal there. I've heard
I
some pretty
also
wild
thank
reports
you.
too. So
Yeah, indeed. And I just want to thank you as well, Jason, for blessing me with your trust to be on the show, and building this together with you is a very rewarding experience. So I just want to put that out there.
yeah, likewise, man. And I honestly don't mention it. I think that what we're doing here is it's synergistic, and I think it's beneficial for anyone who drops in and listens in. So, with that in mind, whether you're new or you've joined us before, if you could please honk that like button real quick before we get started with the show. If you haven't for any reason, I'm going to ask you right now to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications. I promise you that we'll make it worth your while, both this episode and going forward. So that way you'll get notified when we do drop new content. So with that out of the way, uh, I won't talk too much more. I'm going to keep my TA short today. I apologize. We had a hiatus again last week, but we are back here. So I know Chris has a lot of stories and a lot of stuff that he wants to cover, both, like he said, in terms of what's going on in Asheville. And then obviously, there's always a lot going on geopolitically. And we'll tie that all into how it affects the markets and how we can sort of strategize and move forward here. So, with that, what do you got, Chris?
Well, thank you, Jason, for passing the baton as always. Well, I trimmed down my talking points to 10 stories today, um, because there's so much that happened in the last week that it's like drinking from a fire hose, frankly. But to begin the show, I wanted to follow up on a few things that I've been discussing about the technology industry. And one of those things is in regards to the technology company Samsung. And our top story for today's episode is from the TaipeiTimes.com website. And the header is Samsung to cut thousands of jobs. The preview is as follows: falling behind, Samsung shares have declined more than 20% this year as the world's largest chip maker struggles in key markets and plays catch up to rival SK Hynix. Now, I just want to preface this story, ladies and gentlemen, to remind the audience that much of the semiconductor industry, much of the technology industry that is consumed in the United States at present, outside of Chinese sanction activity, comes from Japan and Taiwan, and to a certain extent Indonesia, but primarily Japan and Taiwan. So anytime you see massive layoffs like this, it's usually a domino effect of a lack of resources. And sometimes these stories will be dressed up as some sort of competition snafu. And if you study geopolitics enough, you know that these companies aren't really competing with each other in the ways that they claim. So, with that said, here is leader. Samsung Electronics Co. is laying off workers in Southeast Asia, Australia, and New Zealand as part of a plan to reduce its global headcount by thousands of jobs, sources familiar with the situation said. Now, the layoffs could affect about 10% of its workforces in those markets. although the numbers for each subsidiary might vary, said one of the sources, who asked not to be named because the matter is private. And this is rather common whenever you have these major layoffs, because when those numbers start getting out there, 10% of markets, depending on where those cuts come from, that could be 10% of supply, or that 10% of supply could be a domino effect, because if you cut staff at factories, for example, by 10%, that could affect your supply chain by dozens of percentage points higher than that, especially if they are in critical areas. So this more to me speaks of potential ideas for automation by force, and that was much of what the port strike in the United States of America in this past week was also about. So that's something in between the lines. Now, continuing, the South Korean company has about 147,000 in staff overseas. More than half of its total employees, of more than 267,800 in its latest sustainability report said. Sustainability report. DEI, once again, ladies and gentlemen. But it's not planning layoffs in its home market. Interesting. That tells me that most of their supply comes from outside of their main home markets, which this is what happens whenever you export too much manufacturing, when you export too much infrastructure. You are at risk of geopolitical fallouts within the context of your supply chain whenever you're wholly dependent on others. There's an essay I read about 20 years ago about this trend, and it stated that interdependence is the end of independence. And this is one of the mannerisms that are utilized, from my perspective, in these times to execute triage based economic warfare to limit people's opportunities. This may simply be cutting back, but worldwide layoff speaks to bigger problems at Samsung based upon the energy embargoes that are previously mentioned. With that, let's just move on to our next story, which is more trouble in the Levant, significant problems in the Levant, and we will cover that as succinctly as possible in today's episode. And this is another one of my primary sources from the Cradle, and this article is entitled S&P joins Moody's in downgrading Israel credit rating. And this is published on October 2nd. Israel's credit rating has already been downgraded once in the last year. This is the second downgrade. Now, the downgrade came after Israel escalated its war on Lebanon and was determined even before Iran's massive retaliatory missile barrage on Israel Tuesday night, and Tuesday would have been Tuesday of last week. Now, here is the leader. The global credit rating agency S&P abruptly downgraded Israel's credit rating from A plus to A on the 2nd of October, following Israel's escalation of its war on Lebanon in recent weeks, warning that it could lead to a prolonged and intense conflict. Interesting that they said it could lead to a prolonged and intense conflict. The conflict has been ongoing for at least 1 year, and this conflict has been ongoing in some form or fashion dating back to at least 1884, right? When the first Zionist settlers arrived in Palestine, and that's a part of history that's kind of missed there. So this has been going on since 1884. It's 2024, ladies and gentlemen. So what's 2024 minus 1884? If my arithmetic is correct, that would be, let's see, 140 years time. That's a long time. Okay. That's a lot longer than the last year. So we've already been in prolonged and intense conflict, but it's a different animal this time, ladies and gentlemen. And continuing, and this is from the report, quote, the unscheduled announcement was due to the significant rise in Israel's geopolitical and security risks, close quote, the report stated. Now, the downgrade was announced early Wednesday, but was decided even before Iran's unprecedented retaliatory attack on Israel on Tuesday night. Iranian forces launched some 180 ballistic missiles at 3 separate Israeli air bases as Israel's Iron Dome missile system struggled to intercept. Now, I need to preface this point here, or actually not preface it, but the next point by stating that there are conflicting reports as to how many ballistic missiles were actually fired. Some OSINT feeds suggested that there were as many as 200 to 400 ballistic missiles. Some state there's 180. And something else about Israel's Iron Dome. The Iron Dome is designed to intercept missiles that are significantly smaller, like anything that would be like a shorter range rocket. These are ballistic missiles, and in many cases, hypersonic missiles. Iron Dome is not designed to intercept those, unfortunately. It's David's sling and the arrow system that are not mentioned in this paragraph that are actually capable of intercepting those ballistic missiles at higher altitudes. And that's how the ballistic missiles that Yemen targeted Tel Aviv with were intercepted. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clearly understood by the audience. And one more point that I'll speak to is towards the end, which is about Moody's. Now, another major credit rating agency, Moody's, downgraded Israel's credit rating by 2 levels on the 27th of September, which is below A. I think it was like the highest B rating, as I recall. I'd have to double check that. And they stated, quote, geopolitical risk has intensified significantly, close quote, amid Israel's recent escalation of its war in Lebanon and its ongoing war on Gaza. So what does this mean? Well, this means that one, borrowing costs are going to increase dramatically. Right now, only one of Israel's ports is functional, Haifa port, Ashdod port, and Eilat port are not functional at all. Eilat port is in bankruptcy proceedings as we speak, and that is Israel's only Red Sea port. And that means that 2/3 of its port infrastructure are out of commission. So commerce can't flow in, which means they have no money to actually move forward with any types of debt repayments. And up to 60% of all small businesses have gone under, estimated, if those numbers are to be perceived to be true or correct, that have been from official reports in the previous few months. So, and as we speak with the Middle East, there is an impending Israeli counterattack that has been announced, but it has not yet taken place. And it has been estimated that if Iranian oil facilities are successfully struck, that oil prices could increase to as much as $200 per barrel. So this is telling for a few reasons that I'll come to later in the episode. But moving on, our next story is going to be rather brief about the port strike. Now, this is from Delta One on X. Now, the port strike's already over, ladies and gentlemen, but the affected impact is as follows. So many importers and manufacturers pulled forward orders over the summer to try to get ahead of the looming East Coast port strike that was underway last week. There was fears that if it wasn't resolved very quickly, the strike could affect 40 to 50% of U.S. imports, and that was from S&P Global Market Intelligence. And there was probably some pressure put on the port operators, in my opinion, because that would have very likely imminently led to our own downgrade. Israel's lost 66% of its port capacity, and we're about to lose half of ours. So somebody, perhaps an adult in the room, decided to say, yeah, we need to capitulate on this. And that was probably the right decision from my perspective, regardless of what side of the fence you sit on. Now, those disruptions would have put significant upward pressure on prices of goods, which would have complicated the Fed's ambition to wind down inflation, which, like you've stated, Jason, is just an illusion. And higher shipping costs to the East Coast in anticipation of the strike were already contributed to, and this is at the exact same time that this mess in Asheville is going on, which leads me to believe that much of it could have been potentially coordinated. Now, the strike ended after a few days, and the ports capitulated to a 63% raise demand indexed over the next 5 years for dock workers. So that crisis appears to have been averted, at least for the time being. But there's longer-term considerations as to who owns what ports and where in this country. And if they decide to execute economic warfare by simply shutting them down or hacking them. And another problem with this port strike was the ports were attempting to automate the workers out of existence. So no intel on whether or not they got the appropriate capitulation on that. But similar issues uh, were expressed over the course of the last 10 years, and the ports just kind of ignored them. But it looks like they're paying attention this time, at least. And for one of the biggest stories of today's episode is, and this is from Daily Mail, which is out of the UK. And that's a tiny backwater town in North Carolina will help fuel world's AI revolution with enough quartz to power entire $530 billion semiconductor global industry. Quote, high purity quartz is a vital component of building semiconductor chips, which helps AI powered software to process large amounts of data quickly and accurately and is used in cell phones, laptops, and other electronic devices. The quartz must be high purity because if there are any imperfections, it can hinder the effectiveness, speed, and accuracy of the semiconductors, close quote. That's an anecdote from the article, and that's all I'm going to read from it. But what I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, is that I have extensive experience in North Carolina's hills. There's quartz simply lying on the side of the road to go and pick up. It's as common as blades of grass in other places in the world. That's how abundant this stone is there. And one of the towns that got wiped out in this horrible storm was Chimney Rock. And there are reports in Chimney Rock of FEMA bulldozing all of the properties, and there seems to be a media blackout on this. There hasn't been official coverage other than through OSINT feeds. There are conflicting reports of different types of um, aspects of criminal behavior, including looting and even um, potential clashes with FEMA. So we're seeing some, um, shall we say, parallels with what happened in Lahaina, Hawaii. And I think it's very telling because one of the owners of one of the mining companies that wants to mine this, or at least one of the largest shareholders of it, is Kamala Harris's husband, Douglas Emhoff. So this is likely to ignite a massive scandal, and from my perspective, is very likely to lead to Trump being pushed into the White House in November. The damage control from this is going to be impossible to ignore. The problem is that they're not trying to hide it anymore, which is what makes the domestic situation more dangerous as a result. Moving on to the next story. And this is something I wanted to tie in to the Israeli retaliation narrative and high oil prices that could have resulted as a result of any potential strikes on Iranian oil facilities. Now, the Saudi oil minister has said that prices could drop, oil prices specifically, could drop to as low as $50 per barrel if so-called, quote, cheaters within OPEC Plus don't stick to an agreed upon production limit, close quote, according to delegates in the cartel. Now, these statements were interpreted by other producers as a veiled threat from the kingdom and from House al-Saud that it is willing to launch a price war to keep its market share if other countries don't abide by the group's agreements, is what they stated. And they also, and I'll cover this at the end of the show, they are backing off. They are declaring neutrality, likely because they don't want to invite any more attacks against their oil infrastructure from the Yemenis, which was a significant event in Saudi Arabia. Yemen took out 50% of Saudi Aramco's oil supply during the Saudi and UAE led, as well as US supported war against Yemen that has persisted for most of the last decade, if not longer. So I just wanted to let any listeners of the audience that subscribe to the Trump didn't start any wars during his presidency narrative. Well, he authorized the starvation and genocide of Yemen and did nothing to stop it. So I just wanted to put that out there for anybody, whether they believe that to be objectionable or not. That is factual information, and take with that what you will. And that was published on the Global Eye. Moving on to our next story, and this is from Zero Hedge, and the photograph of the chart should tell you pretty much all that you need to know, frankly. Total U.S. debt has exploded to $35.7 trillion on October 1st, which is up $345 billion from September 27th. Now, on September 30th, U.S. debt should increase at the time of the writing by approximately $300 billion. And according to the article, it will be one of the, quote, biggest daily jumps in U.S. in history, close quote, and will push total U.S. debt to $35.6 trillion. So this is a follow-up. So we've added almost $500 billion to the debt in less than 2 weeks' time, ladies and gentlemen. So I think that the hyperinflation narrative is going to start kicking in sooner than we expect. And if you look at the chart from the Twitter feed of total US debt, at the very end of it, it's a straight line up. Look at the charts of the Weimar Republic hyperinflation and overlay them with this, ladies and gentlemen, over the same time span. And they almost line up to the T, almost on a linear algorithm T that has minimal deviation. So my anticipation is going to be the same thing that I stated in our last show: is expect precious metals prices that are going to make your jaw drop, at least priced in US dollar terms. They are absolutely coming. And we're on a ticking time bomb with this, because in our next talking point, this is from the Financial World Updates channel on Telegram. As this is going on, investors sold Bitcoin and bought gold right as Iran launched their retaliatory or otherwise missile strikes at Israel. So not only is gold decoupling from the COMEX, it's decoupling from fiat, and Bitcoin is starting to become a layer of gold buying liquidity instead of the US dollar. So I don't see this drop in Bitcoin as anything other than a correction or a rebalance trade for people that were holding on to profits from circa 15 to 20K. It would be a smart play to go 50% off if you've been holding at that long, and then shift into gold, especially with the geopolitical risks that are coming in. No entry is a bad entry at this point, from my perspective, ladies and gentlemen. If you're going into precious metals, just get your hands on it. Don't be complacent in terms of managing your operational security, because precious metals are absolutely going to be necessary in the years to come in more ways than you or I realize today. Moving on to our next story, and this is from Protos. Now, I have mentioned Protos in previous shows, and it is one of the places that I tend to go to for research. Now, many may be familiar with this gentleman, Bill Maher, that has a night show in the United States. Well, he's made some silly claims, and the header of this article, and this was published on September 25th, so this is a few weeks, no, not quite a few weeks, but more than a week ago. Bill Maher says crypto mining uses 8% of world's electricity. He's wrong. And here is the leader. In a recent viral video, HBO talk show host Bill Maher wholeheartedly broadcasted his belief that crypto mining consumes 8% of world electricity production. Unfortunately for Bill, that's completely untrue. In fact, the real figure is less than 1%. And I'm going to pause there, ladies and gentlemen. All crypto mining combined in the entire world uses less energy than YouTube.com. I don't see any of these talking heads calling for YouTube to be cut off. Why? Very telling. Continuing. Estimates range from 90 to a maximum of 240 terawatt hours per year, with most estimates for worldwide Bitcoin mining in 2023 nearer to 121 terawatt hours. Even the U.S. Energy Administration estimates somewhere in the region of 120 terawatt hours. Now, although significant, this figure isn't even a single percentage point of global electricity consumption in last year, which totaled over 27,000 terawatt hours. And even using the highest 240 terawatt hour figure, crypto mining's electricity consumption, even under that framework, would still be below 1%. So this narrative of crypto being wasteful is basically just propaganda. It's a way to make anybody think that this is less efficient. It has nothing to do with efficiency. It has everything to do with control, because these people are losing power and they're panicking. And Mr. Marr is also, has also been extraordinarily supportive of the Israeli narrative in the Levant, for which he has been taken to task for multiple times. So why he's making these types of claims is rather bizarre. But this just goes to show, ladies and gentlemen, that the mainstream media continues to lose all of its credibility day by day with all the lies that it continues to tell that are so easily uh, able to be verified to be untrue. But that's the problem, is that people don't do their due diligence largely within the general public. And that's where these types of narratives become very dangerous, is that people will simply take them as factual information without actually checking them up. So do your due diligence, ladies and gentlemen. Poor judgment leads to poor decision making. Moving on to our next story. And the digital ID narrative is kicking in, Jason. Here it is. Kuwait suspends electronic banking for 60,000 with biometrics unregistered. And this is by Mark Skidmore, and it was published on his website. And this is an excerpt from the article. I'm not going to go into it too deeply, but here we go. Quote, following the September 30th deadline for Kuwaiti citizens to undergo biometric fingerprinting, the Public Authority for Civil Information, PACI, has provided a list of unregistered individuals to the Kuwait Banking Association. In response, banks have accelerated the process of freezing accounts in line with a new directive that sets a final deadline of November 1st. Kuwait is very Western friendly, ladies and gentlemen. And something very similar happened in Kazakhstan at the beginning of 2022. What happened then was it was decreed that people could not gain access to their bank accounts or buy groceries or obtain gasoline unless they submitted to a digital ID vaccine passport situation. Within 24 hours, politicians' homes were burned to the ground and security services personnel were strung up from lamp posts. And it was not covered anywhere in the mainstream media in the West. Nobody even mentioned it. Right. So something else about Kuwait is that they suspended parliament and pieces of their constitution after seeing some seditiously minded individuals within them. Well, perhaps the seditiously minded individuals saw this coming and wanted to put a stop to it. So I anticipate that this is a deliberate geopolitical move to rile up the citizenry to force some sort of crackdown. Kuwait is a very wealthy nation, has tremendous amounts of money. They're comparable in some ways in terms of their wealth making capabilities to the UAE, but that's going to change for them very rapidly if the situation in the Persian Gulf area gets lit up by the United States or Israel. Kuwait might see some unintended consequences that aren't good for them. And then I would also encourage anybody in Kuwait to have a look at what happened in Nigeria when they tried to impose a CBDC. Nearly led to the fall of the government, and it backfired spectacularly. Everywhere that this has been introduced has been faced with severe opposition. And with the Asheville situation in play, this just proves beyond any shadow of a doubt, ladies and gentlemen, that we've got economic warfare, we've got financial warfare, and we've got kinetic warfare simultaneously against the population. And in places like Asheville, if you don't have cash, you don't have money anymore. The ATMs all got destroyed, right? They knew we weren't going to comply with their system, so they decided to do this instead. And now this little piece of tomfoolery is likely to destabilize Kuwait. And I wonder if this is someone following Western orders to destabilize Kuwait. This has all the hallmarks of the color revolution playbook written all over it. And we're going to top off our talking points with one more, ladies and gentlemen. This is a Zero Hedge article that tops it off pretty nicely as it relates to the oil markets. Now, the Saudis declared neutrality on Iran-Israel conflict, not for wishing for a repeat of 2019 Aramco attacks that I mentioned earlier. And this was published on October the 4th, just 2 days ago. And here is the leader. The world's largest oil exporter, Saudi Arabia, says that it is staying neutral and on the sidelines when it comes to the ratcheting wars in Lebanon, Gaza, and Yemen, and the Iran versus Israel showdown. Other members of the GCC, which includes Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Oman, and Kuwait, have also this week, quote, sought to reassure Iran, of their neutrality, close quote, in the Iran-Israel conflict, Reuters has reported. These people are scared to death, ladies and gentlemen. Why? Simple. The Bahraini resistance has made a call to arms to target any Zionist interests domestically inside of the country. And they are outnumbered and outgunned by the resistance at this time because they have committed too many of their resources to defending Israel as well as uh, being on standby for any conflicts with Yemen. So they're facing opposition from all sides. On one point, they're doing these bizarre Stalin-esque style tactics where they know a policy won't be accepted by the population, but they implement it anyway just because they feel like they can, regardless of the consequences. And what were the consequences for Stalin? Well, depending on the story you believe, he was poisoned in his train. So when you F around, you find out, ladies and gentlemen. And just because we've got some geopolitical rebalancing happening does not mean that people that have the opportunity to become good actors or to improve their standing will do so. They'll simply try to find a way to gain some type of geopolitical advantage through intrigue or through rabble rousing or through propaganda. Now, continuing later down in the article, now Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has been in Doha this week in Qatar. He told Saudi Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farhan on Thursday, quote, "We consider Islamic countries, including Saudi Arabia, as our brothers, and we emphasize the importance of setting aside differences to enhance cooperation," close quote. Now, unfortunately for Mr. Pezeshkian, he took the bait of the United States when they stated that they would do everything in their power and gave assurances that there would be a ceasefire in Gaza. And instead, they saw Hassan Nasrallah assassinated, which has led to a powder keg exploding in the north of Israel. And there was, interestingly, a Twitter account, Supermensch69, that was deplatformed from Twitter over the course of the last 48 hours after revealing that Hezbollah has gained the initiative and even mocked Israeli troops that were holed up in their positions. And in 2 days, they took out anywhere from 200 to 300 Israeli soldiers per day, with as many as 1,400 deserted or missing. And there are increasing reports of soldier desertions. And his account was quickly swept away, which I found to be very interesting because this is an active duty IDF soldier. And much of the censorship has been targeting people that challenge that narrative, but it looks like even IDF soldiers are being censored at this point. And there are other reports coming in of Kahanists and Haredi Jews clashing in the streets of Safed, specifically the Haredi Jews permitting or prohibiting settlers and their Kahanist allies from being able to enter the shelters. And there are reports of even deaths and injuries. And there's an anecdote that I'm going to top off the show with that was, and I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have it in front of me, but it was future Roman Emperor Vespasian at the time. He was crowned emperor after the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD that led to its destruction. He stated, and I'm paraphrasing, "The best thing that we can do is remain as spectators instead of taking on fanatics who welcome death and are already busy murdering each other." So we are witnessing a repeat of history rather similar to what happened 1,954 years ago during the siege of Jerusalem. And with that, Jason, that is the end of my talking points, and I will toss it over to you for Q&A and TA respectively, sir. Back to you.
Thanks as always, Chris. Wild ride. So here we are. We got hurricanes. We've got unrest in the Middle East, which obviously has been going on for thousands of years, and we just keep poking that bear. And we have the economic stuff going on in the background. So what does all this equal? It's probably going to be at some point. It won't be today. Won't be tomorrow. Probably won't be this month or probably even next year. But at some point, it's going to equal something really, really bad in terms of a larger or wider market collapse. So we've kind of been angling towards that for a while, and I know a lot of other people have, but in the meantime, they are still somehow pumping this system that they've put together. So we will try to stay abreast of that as best we can going forward. Anything else that you might want to add, Chris, before I jump into some quick TA for this week?
I just want to extend my best wishes, my prayers, and my heartfelt condolences to the people of North Carolina, to the people of Georgia, to the people of East Tennessee. I've spent much of my life in these areas, ladies and gentlemen. I know them very well. And watching these places from a distance get decimated is heartbreaking, and my heart goes out to all of you.
Amen. A brief moment of silence for everyone affected. All right, thanks everyone. So moving into the TA, try to bring it into a lighter note here. Things were moving up there, but we're getting a little bit of pullback over the weekend as we're moving into the not only the daily but the weekly close, which pretty normal. So what we're really kind of seeing here, this is a smaller time frame, 7 minute. We're just starting to pull back to like a local point of control in the 200 daily, or excuse me, it's just the 200 MA here. So this purple line is, going to be an area that you'll see some pullback to typically in these situations. So, we've got a little overhead resistance there. We've got what could be a little flag forming here. Something like this. So we'll see if that holds up or if we need a little further retracement. And you can see we've got a high volume node down here, which is in between the 706 and the golden pocket. So did have this area highlighted before. That's in direct confluence with the 706. So that could be an area to look for if we get pullback. If the market's going to be really bullish, you'll only see pullback between this area, which is like 61,760 and about 61.4. If you stay inside this pattern, then we're probably going to rocket out of that. If the pattern breaks down, you'll need further consolidation, but I would say if price action stays in the pattern, the next area to look at for BTC would be like 65.6. So that would break clean out of the 200 daily, which is this green line here, and that's going to be the most significant resistance that Bitcoin has right now. That's sitting at around 63.5. I would say if you start to see 4-hour daily candles close above 63.5, might be in business here. Let's swing out a little bit, get a little more perspective. The hourly's a little cooked, so that's going to have to reset, and that makes me think there will be a little larger pullback. So we'll see if we come back down to these areas based on the hourly. Let's see what the 4 hours got for us. Four hours probably going to have to reset, and it looks slightly consolidative, but you don't have any bearish divergence there. Let's see where our bearish divergences are. You can see we have one right here where this price action was kind of flat, all right, but we see this drop off here and then If we were to move back into like the 15, that'll be pretty dramatic there. You can see that pretty easily, where this swing up on the RSI is higher than right here, but this swing up in price action is actually lower than this one, which corresponds to bearish divergence. So right now, this 15-minute may be trying to reset. So again, stay inside the pattern. You're probably going to rock it out. If the pattern breaks down, look for that larger retracement. Getting an interesting hourly close here. That could hold up on the 21 MA there. So keep an eye on that. Again, price action stays in that pattern. We're going to stay pretty bullish. I'm not going to do altcoins today. Just going to do briefly some indices. You can see here that tether dominance is breaking down on the 22-hour. Stochastics are pointing down. RSI is pointing down. Price action is trying to gravitate back to this 21 MA. If that breaks around that 0.5 fib there, I would look for retest of the 200 weekly. You can see there's been a couple tests of that already. And what I'm starting to like here is if we look at that wick as an anomaly, which it certainly could be. Certainly could be. You know, are we getting something like that where we'll finally see the big pump come in? So that would take you down to like 4% tether dominance. That would be a pretty significant pump for the market. So if we see that happen, be real nice. Exactly what we're looking for. And, you know, conversely, if tether holds this 21 MA on the 22-hour, or you can flip over the daily. I just like the 22 hours. Gives you a little more granularity. It kind of front runs the market just a little bit. But the way these oscillators are looking, you know, if you lose the 50 level here on the RSI, I would look for that dump to continue. There's going to be some support down here at the 200 daily, but it's like at the 5% level. So let's lean towards the big pump right now, since we are in Pumptober. And let's take a quick look at total 3. As I said, I'm not going to look at altcoins, but this will give us an idea here. I really like what's going on here for total 3. On the hourly, we've got this head and shoulders that's starting to form. I like when a head and shoulders has a more shallow right shoulder. And you're seeing a nice retest of this level here, along with the 21 MA and just above this POC. So price action for total 3 above this 21 MA and above this POC is going to stay bullish. And you've got significant resistance here at 605 billion, corresponding with the 200 MA. And then you had the 200 daily up here at around 627 billion, 626 billion, somewhere in that area. You start to see closures above that on like a 4-hour or a daily basis. Things will be looking pretty good. And if you just look at like measured move on this, it's going to take you pretty close to that area here. So you may see some more consolidation before the altcoins really break out. And you may have like a larger pattern trying to brew here. Maybe something like that. Maybe we get a quick dump before this really initiates. But this is looking like bullish consolidation. It doesn't look all bad to me. Maybe could cut this up in another way. So maybe some breakout and retest going on that spider line. And this is like falling broadening wedge type of a thing, which typically has a bullish bias. and that would get you up to this next range that I had highlighted. So it looks like there's larger moves coming for the market, folks. I will cover altcoins more in depth going into the week. It's real quick. Look at what's going on CME. The ES1 futures are looking pretty good. 4 hours forming kind of a cup and handle here. You're seeing consolidation and breakout above a point of control. You're well above the 200 MA here. And let's see what the daily is looking like. And this looks really good. Honestly, if we don't see a fill of this inefficiency here, which is a large one, down to around 56.37. That would be like in the area between the 0.5 and 0.382 fibs. If we don't see that retracement, there's going to be a big breakout. And like if this is a W pattern type of a thing, your next move is going to be up here to like 62.34. And honestly could go higher than that. All right, so I believe a larger move is coming in for the S&P. If we take a look at the Bitcoin futures real quick, and just before I get out of here, let's see if it filled out this pattern that I had kind of highlighted here. Not yet, so it's still chopping. But we're getting this bounce here, right? So it's possible we come back up here, come back down a little bit more, scare everybody, and then rock it off. Either that or, you know, if you see breakout above this level here, this spider line, and start to retest and consolidate in this area. If we start to retest and consolidate around 70,000, you know, 69 to 70,000, look out, that big move's coming. So the daily is looking pretty good right now for CME to open up. So the way these oscillators are positioned, you're getting a bounce off the 50 level on the daily. You're starting to get this curve on the stochastics on the daily. Will be a nice bounce with a couple of bullish candles coming in here above critical moving averages, above the 21 and the 50. You got what is this? Yeah, that'd be your 100, I believe. And when you look at the price action on CME, it's actually above the 200 daily. So technically, in terms of the moving averages, pretty bullish. And you just have that one left to break out of there. So looking pretty good. Looking pretty good, folks. I'm not seeing a big breakdown coming in here. I don't know why there's even still bears left in this market. So if you haven't packed your bags, folks, probably time to start looking into some altcoins and accumulating that BTC. And it's time for the bull run. In my personal and humble opinion, it is time. If you haven't positioned yourself yet, make sure that you do. Please don't construe anything that we're saying here as financial advice on the way out. I just want to add the disclaimer. Do your own research and due diligence, folks. You know, get a financial advisor if that's something that you feel you need. Do that research before jumping into any coin investment project or trade. With all that said, I'm Jason Bruce. I'm going to get honking on out of here for the weekend. I hope that you've made it this far. If you have, please make sure that you're honking the like button on the way out. If you haven't for any reason, get subscribed to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. That way you'll be notified when we bring you these broadcasts in the future in a timely manner. So I think that'll be it for this week. Take care, folks. Again, to anybody who may have been affected by the tragedy out on the East Coast, we hope that things get better for you, and our prayers are with you. Take care, folks. Much love. God bless. And we'll talk to you soon.